So Cook, one, I think, immediate question, Joe, comes up, and that is, will they up his snap share? Will he be more of a feature back? Right. The biggest mark against Cook was his snap counts aren't high enough. His snap percentage isn't high enough. And if he wants more, we wondered, would they give that to him? Now with this level of investment, I think that's an obvious kind of thing to track, whether or not he is used more, or if they already had a sweet spot on how they were using him.
I tend to think it's more about the sweet spot that exists. I think James Cook, with the way that he's built, 5'11", 190, 195 pounds, he's not built to play 70, 80, 85% of snaps. I think that they have him where he's optimized, 250 to 275 touches a year, and allow him to live in that range. And I think that maximizes him and makes sure that he's at his best late in the season. And so I can understand the idea that, suddenly this means maybe more for James Cook, but I think he's at his best and the Bills' offense is at its best when all of those guys are going. And certainly James Cook's the lead back, but I still think he's probably going to be about a 50% of the snaps player. I mean, Josh Allen literally a few days ago again called Ty Johnson the best third down back in the league. And I think that they want all those parts to work together, but James Cook's the lead guy, but I'm not expecting a big uptick in that snap volume.
That's the one area too, Joe, where I almost feel a little comfortable about this deal. I think that there's a long history of those second contracts not going well for teams when running backs start to age. But the way they use him, and I've pointed out before that his workload, even going back to college, like there's not a lot of mileage on James Cook. That injuries could happen to anybody, but I wonder if he's one of these examples of a guy where it does age well because of how the Bills manage him and because, again, like he wasn't even the starter at college.
Yeah, I think that's what gives me a lot of hope as well. That's been kind of the cautionary tale of these running back contracts is they haven't really aged well, and that's where the concern has come from, why you wouldn't pay a running back as well. They're not that hard to find, and the way these contracts age, there's not a lot of great stories to tell. But with James Cook, he turns 26 next month. And to your point, not even a big role in college. He entered the NFL with 297 touches in 4 seasons in college. He's had 630 so far in 3 NFL seasons. And so I think the low mileage on him combined with, a 50% role is going to put the Bills in a good spot to get the most out of this deal. And I think that's what's going to be important. You've made a commitment here, and you need that asset to perform. And I think part of the Bills' challenges over the last few years has been that not happening, whether it's Trey White or Matt Milano or Von Miller or even Dawson Knox. You pay these players and you make a big commitment and you're expecting a certain level of impact, and you don't get it. And so kind of looking at this deal and a lot of the others that the Bills gave out to young players, you kind of feel good about the chances of these aging well and the Bills getting these assets to perform like they're supposed to.
As you're talking about that, Joe, what pops in my head is, and this is a question I've never thought of before, whether it's Shakir or some of the guys that haven't re-signed, Kincaid, Coleman, Rousseau, there's a lot of conversation about the next step they take, right? Can they take the next step as a player and as a contributor to the Bills? Does James Cook have another step, or do we just want him to be exactly what he was? Like, what is the next step? Especially if like the pass blocking thing is kind of off the table, what can he do that would take him to the next level?
Yeah, I love this question, Jeremy. And what I'll say about James Cook is I think over the last 3 years of his career, he's done nothing but take steps. Where he enters the NFL is like, oh, this is a receiving threat. Maybe even should play a receiver, to, let's give him a chance to be a lead back, and that looks really good. But, hey, there's some ball security stuff. He had some drops, certainly not really an asset in pass protection. And then you go to this past season, and he cleans up the fumbles. He cleans up the drops for the most part. And I thought this past season was a big jump for his overall physicality and how he was able to, consistently run behind his pads. And I thought you saw the best version of James Cook this past season. And so as a guy that's taken step after step after step, I'm not going to say that he's capped. But if James Cook was the player he was last year for the duration of this deal, I think we'll look back upon it quite favorably.
What about Cook as a receiver, Joe? Like, do you think there's more to be had there for him?
Absolutely. I think there's room for all of the Bills running backs to have an uptick in receiving ability. And I think that's such an important layer. I've been through the numbers. I mean, the Bills were by far the best team throwing the ball to running backs last year. They just didn't do it as much as they should. And when Josh Allen is able to involve these running backs in the passing game, it is just a very difficult layer for defenses because defenses can't account for everything. And Josh Allen, just because of who he is, puts so much stress on a defense because of what's at his disposal, and he can push the ball. He has access to the whole field throwing it, and, of course, what he can do running the ball and extending plays. But when he layers that with, hey, just taking the profit to the running back, good things happen, and they're in really good spots to make one guy miss and create some yards. And they're actually all three good, like, middle of the field, down the field type weapons as well. So I think James Cook's receiving profile should be more than what it's been, and really I'd apply that to all of the Bills running backs. I think that'd be a big part of where they can grow offensively.
Is there any part about this deal where you're wondering or thinking, like we had a caller yesterday that said, well, you can't pay all four of the three interior linemen and James Cook. When you see the Cook signing, is it an amount of money at all where you're thinking, okay, well now they're going to have to say goodbye to one or two of those linemen, or maybe you were already thinking that?
Yeah, I've been thinking that. The new piece of information that has come, I feel like I've been talking about that all summer, is that you probably have a choice to make between McGovern, Torrance, Cook, and then you kind of lump in David Edwards kind of in that conversation, even though I think he'll be a lot less. I don't think the Bills will be able to bring them all back, but what is new is this new deal, right, with the NFL and ESPN. That's going to make the cap go up significantly, and so maybe that changes things a little bit, but I do think this, if not, I do think the consequence here is probably that you don't re-sign Connor McGovern. I think that he plays out his deal and maybe goes somewhere else because you're probably going to want to give the big money to Osiris Torrance, who is a younger player that you drafted that has, a big time ceiling that he's continuing to develop into. So I think that's probably your consequence, but that puts the onus back on some of these young players that are developing, whether that's Alec Anderson or Cedric Van Prang-Granger, or, that being potentially an early draft pick conversation when we're talking draft next April.
Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills podcast joining us, reacting to the James Cook signing. He gets a 4-year, $48 million deal. We'll wait to get the real numbers and all that, and hopefully that comes out shortly. Joe, before we get you off here, the preseason game happened. Like any big thoughts on what we saw, the quarterback number 2 battle? That was pretty even between those two. But who do you come out of the preseason game thinking about on this roster? Whether it's offense, defense, your big headline, big kind of zoom out moment, zoom out player for this first game.
Well, there's a lot you can get into. Probably Tyrell Shavers, though. I mean, 2 catches, 70 yards. Both were really good examples of route running, to be able to set up his route breaks and get loose and make some big plays. And I've been thinking so much about this wide receiver room. Maybe not as much as you, Jeremy, but I think about it a lot. And I've been very curious to see where it might not be chalk, right, where we've kind of had this perceived top 5. But if the Bills go 6 or someone's going to crash the party, it feels like that momentum is Tyrell Shavers. And, the one thing that they said, Sean McDermott said, it's about kind of earning that trust on special teams as well. Well, that was like his whole thing in college. He's San Diego State's all-time leader in blocked punts, and that was really where he made his impact. And so I'm curious to see if he can really push for this roster. But, I think that's a skill set and a player that I think can provide a lot of value, and maybe even more value than a Curtis Samuel or even an Elijah Moore. So I'm excited to kind of see where that goes. The young defensive linemen, I thought Walker and Sanders did some really good things in their debut. And I thought Trubisky pretty much put himself comfortably ahead in this quarterback race where that's probably the best I've seen him run the Bills offense in a few years now. So I think there's a lot of encouraging things, but obviously some other things that we wish were a little bit better.
Yeah. Rapp and Bishop both being limited. McDermott spoke about the safety position. They got to get on the field. I feel like he's happy with how that is coming together, but of course it has to get on the field.
Yeah, you can feel that urgency from McDermott yesterday where he's saying, look, we're running out of time and we don't really know what Cole Bishop is going to be. And so, that's important, that the communication piece there and playing off of each other, and you're going to spin and disguise coverages, and how they see it and play off of each other is really important. And we were spoiled for so long with Poyer and Hyde. And whether it's been one of those guys being hurt or them being gone the last year, it's been a little bit since we felt that impact at safety. And I think in order for that to be where the Bills want it and where we want it, those guys got to get on the field together and start to gel. And hopefully that can happen soon, because that's going to be a big part of this defense kind of turning the corner and getting back to where it's supposed to be.
Up next, a joint practice with the Bears, and then the preseason game number 2. So the Bills and Bears will chop it up for a joint practice and preseason game number 2. Do you want to see Allen play on Sunday night at all? He says he will sit, he will play. I mean, I'm inclined, if he says he doesn't feel he needs it, then that's my answer. Like, no, Josh, that's fine.
Yeah, I think it's, Josh, what do you want to do, man? That's what I would say. Sean McDermott, what are you thinking? You feel like you need some reps? You good? And whatever he said, I'd probably go with. But, I think there is something to be said for, like, the start of the seasons. Like, the Rams opener was phenomenal, but, it took a little bit of time in that Arizona game. The Steelers game was a flop. The Jets game was a flop. So I think they need to think long and hard about how they optimize this entering week 1, because Baltimore Ravens are no small task to start the year.
All right. Thanks, Joe. We'll talk tomorrow.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Joe and I will be on that Bill Squad show on YouTube with Jerry Ostrowski. We'll be talking with this James Cook thing, I'm sure. You can find Joe at the Locked On Bills podcast. James Cook signs.